Hello, and welcome to episode number 8 of This All Stops When We Start Talking About It. I'm attorney Jill Carlson, and I will be your host for this program. Before we get into case number 3, which is going to be our new case we're going to talk about, I want to just take a brief moment again to express my gratitude to those of you that continue to tune in. I see the view counts increasing all the time. They're not quite where I'd like them to be, but I understand you guys are still taking time to get to know me, and I hope that you believe I'm telling the truth. I have a lot more evidence than what I am showing on screen. I can tell you, I've been working on this initiative on how to tell these stories pretty much for a year. When I did the first iteration of case number 1, I had 13 recording sessions. So for me to get it down to 3 30-minute episodes, hooray, I'm very proud of myself. It's taken me a long time. I also want to take a moment. I've thanked the viewers, but I haven't taken time to thank my clients that are allowing me to do this, the clients that have signed waivers to allow me to tell these stories. I fought for people for a number of years, and I was used to people cowering behind me because I had a loud mouth. I wasn't afraid to fight. I knew the law. And ultimately, I told a lot of you, listen, let them blame it on me. They already hate my guts. So we're going to do this thing and we're going to push forward, but you're going to be okay. I worked hand in hand with a lot of my clients, but a lot of them did hide behind me in fear for years, and I let them do that. But to have people fighting beside me for the first time in my career is amazing. It is a culmination of my efforts. I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in my process and my strategy, my approach to domestic abuse. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than what a lot of other people have. And I'm learning on the fly, and I couldn't have done any of this if you guys all hadn't been in relationships with abusive people that you trusted me to help you get out of. So thank you. I really appreciate you. I love you all. You've become my friends. You become my family. I hope that we all stay in touch for the rest of our lives. I care about you people, and I know that you care about me too. And I know that we've made some financial arrangements so that you could get through your cases that I took a loss on. I didn't mind doing that, but maybe this will pay off for me in the long run, and I won't be so bitter about everything to be in the 22nd Judicial District. I'm not getting monetized on these videos, just in case you're wondering. I say words like suicide and essay, and so I'm not making any money off of this. I have gotten a few donations, which is awesome, and I appreciate that. But I'm not really doing this for money. I would do this even if I didn't get a penny. I'm doing this because I believe in it. And it's not in my makeup. It's not in my constitution to allow this to happen. It's not in my US Constitution to allow this to happen either. And you can call me crazy all you want. I don't really care. If at this point you haven't figured out that I really, really, really don't care what people who don't know me think about me, I'm just going to make it really clear. I don't care what people who don't know me think about me. I do, however, care about the law. I do care about our legislators getting their collective heads out of their you know what so that we can get this fixed. And I really care about the ever increasing number of people who are being victimized by a system that's set up to protect them. And that's what we're here for. So I'm going to expose these things, and I'm doing it with the intention that hopefully some do-gooder legislator will see this and maybe take it to the Colorado legislature. I don't count on my local representatives helping me. They didn't help me when they were in positions of power at the county, so they're certainly not going to help me now that they're in positions of power at the state because they know what I know. So I'll leave it at that. Anyways, back to the story. We're going to talk about case number 3 today. Case number 3 involves a female domestic violence client of mine. I started representing her formally in August of 2023, where she had retained me to file a divorce petition for her and a protective order and get my advice on how to leave the state with her children because she was worried about her safety and the safety of her kids from her ex-husband. They met, I believe in 2013 or 14. They met on an online, a religious-based dating website. My client was looking for a man who was a man of faith. She wanted somebody in her with her religious background, and so I think that was probably initially a part of the attraction. He was financially well off. He was retired. He retired young. But he had financial means. She wasn't looking for a payday. She also had a career. And he had 2 stepchildren from a previous marriage. In their courtship, his first wife and him were going through a pretty nasty post-decree custody dispute. And my client kind of coming in as the new girlfriend was watching it from the outside going, what's going on? Well, she's really horrible to me and she's trying to alienate me from the children and she's doing this and she's doing that. And I don't think that's an uncommon thing whenever abusers are getting out into relationships with new people, that they kind of mince words and kind of camouflage the truth of what really is going on. But my client was like, okay, well, if your ex-wife is a bad parent, then I guess I got to step up. I didn't necessarily sign up to be a stepmom, but let's parent these kids together. The family makeup when they got together was the husband, my client, the second wife, and my client's husband's two stepchildren, a boy and a girl from a previous marriage that he had. When my client and him started dating, he was going through a pretty nasty custody dispute with his first wife. There were allegations made, I think, by both parties. There was a parental responsibilities evaluation involved, but my client was sort of kept out of it, and she was okay with that. She didn't want to be in the middle of his custody dispute. It wasn't her kids, she barely knew these children. When they got married in November of 2014, I believe, and they went and spent their honeymoon at his parents' house. It was her first time meeting his parents. She said that they weren't overly welcoming to her, that kind of, she felt like she had second wife status for sure. Like the mother-in-law kept talking about how wonderful the first wife was and how she gave better Christmas gifts and things like that. And so my client never really felt like she meshed with his family at all. They had a different type of connection and relationship than what her family had, in a way that she didn't really necessarily find healthy, really involved in each other's business, kind of nasty, kind of negative toned interactions, and certainly negative to her. So she said, when my client and her husband ended up having two children, that I think when she came to see me in 23 were 7 and 9, so they were a couple of years apart from each other. She would send pictures of the children to his mother, and his mother told him to stop sending pictures of the children, which later came up in our divorce hearing, which is bizarre. But, anyways, she just said it was just kind of not really a good fit, pretty much from the beginning. But she took her vow of marriage seriously, and she stuck around. Now, like I had mentioned, he was retired. He actually made a pretty decent wage. And then, in the context of his divorce case from the first wife, was able to get some property that he turned around and sold to purchase other property. So he had some rental income. He also had some disability income from the military. So I want to say that his income around the time they got married was about $8,000 or $9,000 a month, which is a pretty good income for a retired person. My client was working in the medical industry. She did have her licensure in through Dora to do the work that she was doing. And so when they got together, they set up a joint checking and a joint money market account. And what she discovered was that he was having her put her money into those joint accounts to fund the household, and his money was going to different accounts that only he had access to. He opened a number of accounts in the children's names where he put $20,000, $50,000, but he was the only person who could access those funds. And in fact, the honest truth is, up until her divorce proceeding, she didn't know the full extent of the financial situation. She was given $100 a month allowance, from him, from her own monies. And she did have access to the accounts, but you know, uh, he was the head of the household. Like, for example, whenever the taxes were prepared, he went and took care of it and brought her a paper and said, everything's done right, just sign it. And she did. She did. She was trusting her husband. And so, one of the things that whenever she came to see me, she was concerned about was obviously finances, because one of the threats he had made to her consistently was that she was going to not have any money and not be able to take care of the children. In fact, I think the threat specifically that she told me he liked to use was that she was going to be broke and homeless in a box behind the Walmart, if she didn't do X, Y, and Z. And so when she finally came to see me, like I said, she called me in August of 2023. We met at the Denny's in Cortez because I didn't have an office, because, like I've been telling you repeatedly, I was trying to get the heck out of there and they won't let me leave. They keep continuing my matters. They keep pushing things out further and further, hoping I'm going to mess up so that they can say, see, we told you she was a bad person. I hope I don't, knock on wood, but I'm human. I guess I could mess up, but long story short, we met at the Denny's because I didn't have an office, and we had to meet secretly because she didn't want him to know where she was at. because she believed that he may be tracking her, following her. She had to purchase a different phone so that she can make calls to people so he didn't know who she was calling. She kept that phone hidden, and she even, when she came to see me, was telling me quietly, like, "Hey, I'm getting a different job because I know the minute I do this, he's gonna go mess with my employer." Because he had done the same thing to his first wife. That's why he had retired early. He was forced into retirement because him and his first wife worked together on the job, and he had been so ridiculous to her and to all of their coworkers, trying to get them to take a side, that he was basically told, "You're either going to be fired and disgraced, or you can quietly resign and start taking your pension and your retirement early and go on with your life." And he chose to do that. Um, he did hold a license in a particular medical branch that he could have gotten a career making a lot of money if he wanted to, but he didn't want to because he couldn't admit that he had caused these problems and he was going to lose his job. So, anyways, that's why she had kept all these things secret. And so when we first sat down, she said, "Do you remember me?" And I looked at her and I'm like, "I'm really sorry. I don't. I've seen so many people over the years. I've had so many referrals from Renew. I've heard all kinds of your horror stories. And I don't remember you." So she said, "Well, I came to see you in 2017, and at that time, my husband was trying to evict me from our marital residence." And I looked in my Gmail to search her name, and lo and behold, sure enough, there was the email back at the very tail end of 2017 or beginning of 2018. And I said, okay, thank you. I'm so glad you came back. I'm glad you're ready to go. This is horrible. You should never be threatened with your housing like this. This is awful." And she goes, "Oh, it's worse than that now." Like, okay, well, what led you to coming here to me today? Why are you ready to go this time? What's the situation? She let me know that in the month preceding us meeting, her husband had stopped. He had a small pension that was going to the joint marital account to help fund the household expenses. Like I said, she got her $100 a month. He started taking over the grocery shopping and would not allow her to shop for groceries because she didn't buy the right things or she spent too much money. They had a number of fights. He started recording her. It was really bizarre because he was clearly being abusive in these recordings, but he believes that these recordings were indication of her being abusive to him because she was disagreeing with him. He gave me those recordings in the context of our evidence, and I was like, "Thank you." And his attorney was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he," because he did get an attorney later, and I was like, "Yep, I know. I can't believe he did it either." Anyways, so my client said, "I'm really fearful." She, at the very beginning of this, she's not that way anymore, but at the very beginning of this, everything I suggested, she panicked and, "Oh, he's not going to like that. He's not going to like that." I'm like, "Listen, you need to here's a ground rule right now. I don't care what your ex has to say. I care about what the judge has to say. I care about what Big Papa Judge is going to have to say. That's all I care about. So stop worrying about your ex." And she relayed a couple of situations to me that I know to be domestic abuse. One of them was she was sitting on the couch next to her oldest daughter, and he got upset with her for something, and he came right up to her and threw a cup of water in her face. Her and her daughter drenched them, yelled at them, and then left. Another incident, which he was so gracious to record for us, showed him yelling at her when she and the kids are at the end of the hallway going, "You're abusing me, you're abusing me." And then I don't know exactly what happened because we never got the full video. He only gave us 7 seconds of the video, but you see her retreat with the two children and go back down the hallway. And he claimed that that was indication of him being abused. But my client claims, and I believe her, that after the part of the video he didn't share with us, they went and locked themselves in the bathroom in the master bedroom, and he banged on the door with her and the two children cowering in the bathroom for approximately 6 to 8 minutes before he finally left. Also, her oldest daughter, who I believe at the point was 9, had let it slip that their dad was going to take the children out of the state without talking to the mother, and that they were all going to go down to this other state. And my client tried to approach her husband about that, saying, "Hey, why is my kid telling me you're going to take our children away from me? What's going on there?" And he would not give her information. "Oh, it's a family matter. It's a private family matter." And she's like, "Yeah, it's my family. and I need to know what's going on. And so they had some escalating conversations. And so she finally decided, okay, we go to our church. I'm going to try to talk to him about this in the church setting, because at least in the church setting, there's other people around. And if he's going to blow up on me, then other people will see it to help me. And so she tried to approach him about it at church, and that led to an argument that happened later at the house, where in front of the children, he told her that I've hired a lawyer and I'm changing my will, and my lawyer and I are creating a war chest, and in 1 year is what he did to her. And she said, "That's the final straw. He threatened to kill me in front of my children. I'm done. I'm not letting my children grow up like this." Both of their children were daughters. She said, I do believe in biblical marriage. I respect and honor the role of the man as the head of the household, but this thing that's happening right here is not biblical marriage. And I do not want my children to grow up to think this is okay." And I said, "Okay, well, we got to do this." So, we talked about a retainer agreement. I routinely required a $4,500 retainer, which didn't usually get us through the case, but would get us pretty far. And she had been saving her $100 a month retainer pretty much since she came to see me in 2017, so that she had enough money to leave. $4,500, 45 $100 bills. She had it. And I didn't know that at the time. I feel kind of like a jerk, but I mean, that's, I have to charge for my services. But um, she brought it to me, and I said, "Okay, this is my recommendation. You need to file for a divorce. You need to absolutely file for a protection order, starting out with no contact and with distance limitations. You need to ask for primary custody of the children right now, primary parenting status under this temporary order." And she had told me she had no family in Colorado. She moved there, I think, for a job, and then met him and stayed there, but her family was not from there. They were from back on the other side of the country. And so she told me, "I don't want to live in Cortez. I don't think I'll ever be safe there. I think he will follow me and make my life a nightmare, just like he did to his ex-wife. I want to move, and I want to take my children with me." And I said, "Okay, then I think you need to get a child and family investigator, because that is the best way for us to convey this information to the court." So I believe on September 12th of 2023, I filed a divorce petition, protection order, a request for a CFI, request for temporary orders for her. Now, when you file a protection order, it's supposed to be heard that day. There's supposed to be an ex parte, if you know, if the language within the document meets the merits for protection order, which here we were asking for a harassment, domestic violence based protection order, domestic abuse based one. It's supposed to be heard that day. I don't know what happened with the Montezuma County Court. I have no clue if it was just short staffing or what, but we didn't get heard until 2 days after we filed, which was really scary for my client, because she had to lay in bed next to the man that she had just told the court was being abusive to her. And we were hoping that he didn't have a lawyer like he claimed. I didn't think he did, because the things he was threatening her with, I'm like, dude, he's full of crap. He's not talked to a lawyer. He's just trying to scare you. That's not a thing. Whatever threat he's making to you, that's not the way it goes. So yeah, I don't think he's talked to a lawyer. But we didn't know. I didn't know if there was a lawyer in the Colorado court system. We have lawyers have the ability to monitor the court system for filings under cases and names, which is concerning, because if you have a lawyer who's aligned with somebody bad, they can find out things in the court system. It's just a concern I have in Montezuma County. There's one particular attorney who works at the DA's office, or who was working at the DA's office. I don't know if they're there anymore, but who I definitely believe was spying on the court system. Appeared at a couple of my hearings that they weren't involved in, just to watch. And I think that that was an intimidation tactic, trying to scare my clients and I. I'll keep that person's name out of it, but do your best guess on who you think that might be. Um, anyways, long story short, we went ahead and got this thing filed, and it took us 2 days, but they entered a protection order on behalf of my client. Now, my client was very, very firmly entrenched in her church culture, and so it was really hurtful to her that whenever she got a protection order, her husband went to their church and started telling everybody that he was abusive to him. She was lying to the court. She was trying to leverage the children against his house, and that if he was willing to give her the house, that she would give him the kids. The entire church, with the exception of one woman, turned their back on her. One woman texted her and said, "Hey, I I kind of know what's going on," and sent her a Christian podcast on narcissistic relationships. And my client said, I can't believe they took his side. I can't believe my church, my whole entire church community took his side. It was very hurtful to her. And I always try to be very sensitive to the religious persuasions of my clients. It's not my job to tell them that they can't be religious and be in the court system. It's not my job to say their religion's wrong. I try to learn what their religious beliefs are and then try to accommodate my role and my response around that. And so what I said to her is, I don't understand why your church did that. And I'm sure that they don't know everything. They're getting one side of the story, which is his side of the story. And I can understand your frustrations, but it sounds to me like that church is probably not the church for you if they're going to take his side. Anybody who is not willing to hear you out and anybody who's willing to blindly believe these lies in the face of your normal behavior, your normal demeanor was never going to be on your side anyway. So don't worry about them. I'm sorry that happened to you, but go find another church community. She did. She did. She found another church community there that she was happy with for the rest of the case, but that was very, very hard for her. Um, very hard for her to be abandoned by her church family, especially when it sounds like, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in episode 2, but her church was well aware of what was going on. And because of I don't fault the church. It's not the church's job to get involved in domestic abuse situations. That being said, I do kind of feel like it's the church's job to support all of their parishioners, regardless of what is being said about them. And I think the fact that not a single person besides a female congregant reached out to this woman, I can understand why she felt abandoned. And I'm certain people watching this are probably from that church, and you probably know what I'm talking about. And this is not intended to shame any of you, but it's intended to make you think about your response because there's way more people going through this than that one woman. And we, as a community, especially if we're going to exercise our church powers inside of a community, have a duty to ensure that the members of our community are safe and feel welcomed and feel protected. And that didn't happen here in this case. So we got this thing filed. The husband was granted one civil standby. He was able to finagle two. I know the Cortez PD is not necessarily overly thrilled to do civil standbys, nor is the Montezuma County Sheriff's Office. That being said, when there's a domestic violence-based protection order that prohibits somebody from possessing firearms, letting them handle firearms at a civil standby is probably not a good idea. That happened here in this case. He did end up hiring a lawyer a couple of weeks in. That lawyer contacted me right away, and I thought, okay, cool, I like this lawyer. We're gonna be able to get somewhere. No, that's not the case. His lawyer basically, I think, my personal opinion, I think that the client did a lot of the work, and the lawyer just filed whatever the client said because a lot of it didn't make sense. And I've known that lawyer for a number of years, and I was quite frankly a little concerned where I'm like, is he being gaslit by his own client? Because the things he's asking for are not based in the law. And, him and I went back and forth. It's kind of unfortunate. I really actually like that attorney. And I kind of feel like this case sort of severed our working relationship because I don't like anybody who tries to cover up criminal behavior. And I think there was criminal behavior in this case. And I think the lawyer tried to cover it up. And what I think the lawyer should have done instead is say, hey, you're using my services to perpetrate a fraud against the court, and I have to withdraw. And I understand that that would be a money loss, but at what cost? I mean, if you end up getting disbarred because you did crimes, then maybe that's more of a steeper cost. But I don't know. That's just my little soapbox moment. We did not have the protection order hearing right away. In fact, the husband wanted to continue it, but wanted us to remove the children because we had placed the children on there initially. And I talked to my client about that, and I said, it's really uncommon for a court to put children under a protection order for their parent. There really has to be something serious. And yes, I agree that his behaviors are really, really, really inappropriate, and they're definitely civil definition of domestic abuse. But a lot of times just because a parent is abusive to another spouse doesn't mean they'll be abusive to the children, and until we have information that he's doing something like that, there's not really a whole lot that I can do to prevent that. So the court's probably going to remove the kids anyway. I think as a way to move this thing forward, let's agree to remove them, and let's see if we can negotiate parenting time. And had I known Had I known what was to come, I never would have made that recommendation. I made that recommendation based upon my years of experience, knowing that cases sometimes start out hot and heavy with protection orders, and there's lots of emotions and lots of anger and lots of accusations being thrown around. And usually you get a couple months in, and the judge comes in and lays the smack down and says, no, we're not going to do it like that. And then things calm down. That happened over and over and over with that attorney. I have done that same case style 100 times. And so I figured it just like every other time, like, okay, cool. Things are going to calm down. Unfortunately, they didn't. The husband tried to have the stepchildren there in the courtroom to intimidate my client, like they were going to testify against her, which was a concern for my client because my client was aware that in his first custody matters with his first ex-wife, he had coached his children to lie about her on numerous occasions. It required a ton of CPS intervention. And he even had his son making allegations of SA against the mother's then boyfriend, now husband. My understanding is that CPS did investigate those allegations and told the husband, stop coaching your children to say these things. This is really dangerous to your kids. And he was never arrested for false allegations, but his reward was that he didn't have 50-50 parenting time anymore, which is what he'd had before. After they had that custody matter, when my client had just first gotten married to him, he suddenly went to having parenting time every other weekend, even though he convinced my client. He really did. And I know it sounds crazy to say convince, something you can see with your own eyes, but look at what's happening in our country. People are telling us stuff and we can see that it's not what they're saying, but no, this is what it is. And so that's that gaslighting thing. He had convinced his wife that even though they only had the kids two nights out of every 14 days, that he still shared 50-50 parenting time with his ex-wife. And that was absolutely not the case. He had his parenting time taken away significantly because of his behaviors. But of course that wasn't his fault. It was the ex-wife's fault, and it was Judge Walker's fault, who was their judge, and yada yada yada. And it was the PRE's fault who did the thingy, and it was, his boss's fault who told him he could retire early. It was everyone's fault but his, which is really common with these type of people who have, again, I'm going to use that phrase, that colloquial phrase of what I say, like narcissistic type personalities. They have, in my opinion, a absolute abject fear of not being in control. While everything falls around them, they will steadfastly lie straight in your face that everything's fine. So that's something that the court is not appropriately equipped to address. We don't have mental health professionals working as judges. So, I'm certain a mental health professional would see it right out of the gate and be like, oh my God, personality disorder. But my judge can't do that. My judge can say, okay, sir, you want your parenting time, and I'm going to give you every other week. We went to a couple of hearings, and we ended up getting that parenting time order. The husband at one point claimed that he was hearing impaired and that he couldn't hear me whenever I asked questions, which is hilarious because you all know I'm loud as hell. And so it was very clear that he was just trying to manipulate. He would not give us any financial information. So we're there trying to argue over who's going to pay bills and who's going to pay this and who's going to pay that. And because of the fact that he refused to give us any documents, the judge said, okay, well, then you can pay all the household expenses while the case is pending. Um, we asked for a CFI. It took 2 months for the CFI to get appointed. A CFI, just to recap, I've talked about them briefly in a couple of other episodes, but just to make sure you're on the same page. A child and family investigator, or a CFI, is a neutral, independent investigatory arm of the court. They are appointed in cases where there is high conflict. One of the parties is requesting relocation, which here there was. There's domestic abuse, and there's a lot of information going on that the court needs to sort of figure out. But basically, it's a way to condense a ton of testimony into a report that gets issued, and then the CFI is allowed to testify. CFIs are not mental health professionals, although they can be. They are not required to be. But in the role of CFI, a mental health professional cannot make any diagnoses, cannot do any testing. All they can do is go to the judge and say, hey, I think we need mental health evaluations, and I think this should be referred to what's called a parental responsibilities evaluation. There's a big difference in the price between the two of them. PRE can cost up to $100,000. It can cost really whatever you want. I would imagine those big high profile cases like Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt probably have custody evaluators, parenting evaluators. A child and family investigator is a more precursory search. There is a cap, a statutory payment cap on them that they can't request to exceed. But I believe the last time I looked at the law, it was $37.50 per case with a $500 testimony limit. And I'm sure those numbers are different. But basically, CFI cost differential is here, but the results are different. PRE is up here. You can get a lot more stuff here: evaluations, assessments, domestic violence evaluations, etc. But it comes at a cost. And stop and ask the question, why do people in the divorce court realm have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on third party professionals to tell the judge what's happening in their own lives? I don't know. I don't think it's, I was a CFI. I resigned my CFI membership when I knew I was moving to Kansas, but I was a CFI. I'll tell you what I use CFI for. And I probably shouldn't say this on here, but I really don't care because I'm probably going to get disbarred for all of this anyway. So I'm going to say it. You know what I use CFIs for mostly? Getting in child hearsay. That's 100% the reason why no, I should say 100%. That's 90% the reason why I want to get them in there because I know I can't have the kid come testify. Normally, with the exception of Judge First, children aren't allowed to testify in court. They're prohibited from being there. The court has the ability to do in-camera review, where they can meet the child privately. But when I have information that a court needs to know and I can't bring a child in there to testify, I get a CFI because a CFI can say, child told me this. Now, does that mean the court relies upon it? They're not supposed to, but they do. That's why I use it. And I know I'm not alone and I'm giving away the secret. But again, like I said, they're probably going to disbar me for speaking about this anyway. So who cares? I guess I'll spill the secrets on my way out. So we had the CFI appointed. It took until November 13th for her to get appointed. And the CFI appointed was Tisha Strawn. If you're not familiar with Miss Strawn, she was formerly an employee of the Montezuma County Sheriff's Office. I know she was a deputy. She claimed she was a detective. I'm not aware that she was, but she may have been. I know that she no longer holds Colorado Peace Officer Safety Training Standards, and I don't know if that's because it was removed or if that's because she no longer works there. But I do know that she is not a certified individual with those with the post certification. She lists that on her resume as if she is, which I have a little bit of an issue with because I feel like that sort of implies some sort of instant credibility, which, sorry, lots of cops lie, including Miss Strawn in this role. She did. And we're going to talk more about Tisha when we get to the next part. Like I said, I know that there's a lot of stuff in these cases, and it's hard for me to tell them quickly. But we had the CFA appointed, and my client had to pay for it. They did a division of the payment. My client made about $3,600 a month to her husband's $11,000 a month, and so I think she had to pay 27% of the cost, and the other side paid the 73 or somewhere around there. I don't remember what the cost split was on it, but he had to pay a little bit more for it. And whenever she first contacted Miss Strawn said, "Hey, we're gonna hold off until after the holidays," which I found to be a little strange. I'm like, well, we've got a hearing set for February. I really think that, or no, excuse me, her report was due in February. February 8th was her report date, February 8th, 2024. And I'm like, it's a little abnormal for her to not want to meet the children and you right away, but it's not necessarily a violation as long as she's looking at the court file and looking at documents and things like that. And so, we didn't hear from the CFI. We didn't have a case. I'm still trying to get financial documentation from the other side. We did get a sworn financial statement where he put all of my client's assets on there and none of his and said, well, they're marital. They're not marital. And I said, cool, you still have to give them to me. You can't pretend like that they don't exist. And in the middle of all of this, the court awarded my client child support. So I told his attorney, do not do not take that money out of the joint marital funds, which is actually her money. I forgot to mention this, in the month leading up to August, when she filed, he had funneled over $700,000 away from her. And I think he left her $14,000 in her joint account. And I said, do not let him pay child support out of those joint funds. He went and paid off all of his credit cards and made her first child support payment out of her money to her in October, November of 2023. She never got that money back, even though we told the court we asked for attorney's fees. Court ignored us. But Miss Strawn, basically, we had to reach out to her in January because she still hadn't contacted my client. And in the meantime, my client was having issues with protection order violations. She saw her husband following her around. He was unemployed. He would be at places that she knew he didn't need to be. He was claiming that because she changed employers to keep him away from her employer, that she didn't want a protection order anymore. He was trying to find ways to interfere with the children. He even called their piano teacher, trying to arrange the lessons or cancel them so they would be on their time, on his time. Court ordered my client to send information about the children to him, and the first time we did, the attorney for her said, "Don't send us any information." The little girl, the oldest one, started coming back saying, "Daddy says you're going to hell. Daddy says you're a sinner. Daddy says you stole his recliner." She caught the child trying to sneak items out of the household that the husband had asked her to steal. And I'm like, this is not okay. This is emotionally dangerous to your child. You need to get your child enrolled in counseling right away, which she did. Had Access Mental Health. That ended up being a problem later, we'll talk about. But I thought we were doing the right thing. And so I said, hey, these things of the child saying, "Daddy says you're going to hell," those are third party violations. You need to report that to law enforcement. Do you think law enforcement helped her? No, they treated her horrible. And it's sad because the officer, I'm not going to say his name on here. I hope he watches this video. This officer, I know him personally. I was the child and family investigator for his case. He should know better. He should have known better, but he didn't. And said that those were non-harassing things. In the meantime, my client kept having someone break into the house. She believes it was the stepson at his father's direction. Things were missing. She had surveillance cameras that were only accessible by him that she had to disable. She had to pay for have new locks put on the door. And I said, call the cops and tell the CFI. This is nuts. You shouldn't be going through this. We went and got you in order to protect you, and none of them are helping you be protected. That's crazy. And then they're mad at me for calling them and saying, hey, why aren't you protecting her? Um, the CFI didn't meet with her, hadn't met with her with the children, and it looked like the CFI wasn't doing anything. On top of that, the CFI had been appointed for two reasons: to investigate allegations of domestic abuse and to investigate the living situations in both the current situation with the father and where the mom wanted to move to, so that she could make recommendations to the court so the court could make an informed decision. And so at the beginning of January, after the CFI had still refused to speak to my client, and my client was having increasing issues with the children, and she was trying to call law enforcement and get help and getting no assistance, she reached back out to the CFI and said, "Hey, are you going to talk to me?" And the CFI, well, she talked to her, but not quite in the way that we would hope. And so um, I think I'm going to pause it there for today because I don't want to get too far into what happened. But just next time, you should know if you have a CFI or CLR involved in your case, or you know someone that does and they're having issues, I would really strongly urge them to tune into the next episode because I'm going to lay out exactly what happened and how Tisha Strawn single-handedly prolonged this case, assisted with the abuse of my client, financially deprived my client, and how the Colorado court system did absolutely nothing to make it right or protect my client. It's a really bad situation we got going on. I know that the legislators didn't foresee the chaos that was going to ensue from them passing these rules. But now that it's out there, we have a duty to fix it, legislators. And so I hope you're watching. And if you're not watching, then I hope my audience is active participants in the political process. Write to your legislators, even the one from Montezuma County. Maybe this time he'll start listening to us. Anyways, that's been This All Stops When We Start Talking About It. I hope you all have a great day, and we will be back on Friday. All right, take care and have a good day.